Lawrence, welcome back, sir.
What's up, man?
Not much. Tell me a little bit about what's happened. It's been about a year since we did our first podcast together, and I appreciate it. A lot has changed, I think, for you as far as your career, progress. I was lucky enough to see the taping of your special.
Oh, you were there that night.
I was
you
there
were
that night. Yes, sir.
That night is such a blur to me in a lot of ways.
So get into it. How about we talk about what was the process of going from all of these jokes that you've been working on and cultivating and actually kind of like getting it into a fluid special?
It was, and I mean, it's weird. In some ways, it was difficult because, I've been getting to headline more and more. And through the last year, I was headlining more and more like full weekends. But a lot of it, I was kind of having to do different feature sets, work out the material, and kind of just in my head know what the narrative flow was going to be.
Okay.
But I'm a very narrative-based person. Like, I grew up reading a lot and studying the art form. So I think story is something that just kind of naturally comes in my head. Like, things kind of have to have a flow to them for them to make sense to me. So over that course of the year and the months leading up to, after Travis and I, it's on the I'm a Fan of Network page, the special is, please check it out. Whenever we decided that we were going to do this, I think it was probably like I had like 3 months or so to like be like, okay, let's really batten down the hatches and try to start getting it where we want it.
Right.
And it's weird with comedy because it's this sense of it's never ready and it's never where it's supposed to be.
So that's what I was going to ask you, because part of the great thing about what is told about art, any type of art, especially paintings, it's like it's never finished. Do you feel the same way with, let's say, your special or stand up in general?
It's like, whoever painted this painting that's behind you, they obviously sold it. They were ready to let it go. But I'm sure if they were here and they would look at it, they would immediately see some things that they would change about it. And I felt that it's weird because the special, if people don't know, a lot of times when people tape a special, they're going to tape like 2 to 4 nights.
Yeah. So at least I know the standard has always been you do 2 nights and then kind of edit and splice things together to kind of, some nights, one of the jokes may not hit the way you wanted it to, and the other night it hits really well. It's the same flow of jokes, but you see audiences react sometimes differently, and it has nothing to do really with the joke itself. It's more the flow and kind of like the vibe that you're getting from an audience. Later shows versus earlier shows kind of make that effect, in my opinion, too.
Yeah, the energy of a room can really cause gravity that you exist in, and you want to control it as best you can, but you can't always do that. So we decided, we kind of had the premise I had in my head was, I'm going to just do one show. That way we can have the most packed audience that we can get. And then I'm going to just way overshoot the time. And then we can cut down from there. I think I did like an hour 13, hour 14.
I wasn't keeping track. I know I was just with the rest of the audience, really enjoying it and laughing a lot. And I mean, it was a packed house. Everybody was enjoying it. And the jokes, I won't ruin any of them, were so varied that everybody got something out of it. Everybody had a moment that they could connect with and then just kind of like ride out that wave of the rest of the jokes. And I think that happened really early on. You could tell kind of like first few jokes hit really well, and it just started this cool flow that kept going. I think people maybe didn't even want you to end at 1 hour 13. You could have gone longer and we would have still enjoyed it. Which
is wild to me. It was, it was one of those things, since we were doing it in one shot, we had one take. It felt like, it put so much pressure on me that I think I kind of blacked out a little bit. Like, right before the show, I was in the green room, and I was so thankful whenever Jimmy and Carrie and Shiva showed up, because having them to talk to, like, kind of got me out of my head. And we all just started making fun of each other like we do, and we're just riffing and having a good time. And then by the time they're like, hey, you're up next, it was like I just went up there and then did the set, and I got off stage immediately. I felt happy about it, which is not always the case. I felt like, oh, that went well. But it wasn't until like maybe a week or 2 later where I feel like I finally took a breath and was like, hey, we did it. And then I had all this pressure on me about, Travis did such a great job with the editing, and I was really more hands off than I typically would be, but I think I felt a little overwhelmed by everything. And then once it came out, it was just like when it finally came out, and it was like 2 weeks later, I think I could finally just be like, okay, we did good. We did good. I'm very happy with it. Travis did such a good job. I mean, if you guys go and watch it, we did one night of filming, but there's definitely nothing like budget about it. It's all the camera shots are great. The intro that we filmed is great. I think everything looks super professional, and it's like I'm just very happy that I'm happy to stand behind it.
And I think that you should be happy and you should be proud of the work that you put into it, especially since, a lot of comedians, when they speak about their special, they're like, oh, it was like a year ramping up to it and this. And you had 3 months. And you had what for me was a very clean, well thought out flow and a well thought out special. And so you should be very proud of that. And I was going to ask you this did you want to be alone in the green room, or was it great to have like friends come by and kind of like give you that, take the edge off a little bit, I think?
Yeah, I think the distraction is welcome. Like if I'm just left to stare at a wall for too long, I get a little wonky. The wheels on the bicycle kind of start doing this a little bit.
Right.
So just having people there to distract me and talk to. And also I think for comedy, we all live in our heads alone so much during the day that even when I'm at work, sometimes I'm not saying a lot to anybody. So by the time you get to the comedy club and you walk in, you realize you haven't had you haven't really found your it's like an instrument or like playing piano or guitar. Like there's a little bit of a warm up,
right,
to it, especially with comedy. And then like once you start talking to your other comedy friends or just talking to people, and you kind of just get going a little bit, it all kind of starts turning on. It's hard to walk on stage and have not said anything to anybody all day.
That seems like one of those.
Yeah, I think whenever I was newer, and I get embarrassed by it a little bit now. Like whenever I was newer, I would, I think every comic does this. Whenever I was new, I've been doing this almost 9 years now. But when I was new, you would like I would rewrite everything on the piece of paper, like my set list, like one word for every joke, and I would just rewrite it and rewrite it and rewrite it right until I was going up because I was just trying to burn it into my head. I was trying to make sure I didn't forget anything. And whenever you've been doing it for a long time, that all just kind of turns off, or at least it did for me. Like I kind of like just taking it all and throwing it in the air and kind of seeing where it goes. I find more peace that way. I find more things to wiggle around on. Like that's where I find the tags. Like if I'm trying to memorize every single thing, you kind of become this robotic monster that is just kind of regurgitate. You're not speaking, you're regurgitating information that you've logged in your head, even if you're the one that wrote it.
Okay, so I guess like the whole idea is just to kind of get out of your own head at some point, so it doesn't become almost like, I guess a comedy special or comedy in general shouldn't feel scripted in any way.
Yeah.
Even though you've worked on it probably for weeks and months, and jokes have come in and out of the lineup, and things have shifted around as you've done gigs and headlined and kind of gotten the opportunity to, oh, maybe this should be shifted here, and kind of falls into. But if it's done well, nobody really thinks about it as a scripted event. More they think about it as something coming off the top of your head almost.
For sure. And it is funny because, I mean, as a writer of comedy, one of the things I really enjoy is whenever I finish watching a special. Because, when you watch a movie or if you look at like a Beyonce album and you see all the people that helped write like one sentence.
Right. Yeah. Like the accolades in the back of all these people that have kind of like executive producer this and writer that and da-da-da, and there's like 1,000 people that have done something. But you look at a comedy special, it's usually written, directed, produced. Maybe 2 names total come up there. It's the same comedian writes it, the same comedian performs it. A lot of times they produce their own stuff.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's a director involved. Usually there's an editor, obviously. That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
But it's a very tight-knit group of people, if more than 3 exist, that kind of set everything up.
I just love the written, acted, and performed by, and it's just one person.
Yeah, it seems very cool.
I've always I think that's one of the special things about comedy is not as many hands touch the product before it's presented to you, which is not the case with almost any other thing that you purchase or ingest.
Oh yeah, I mean anything simple that you like, even if you were going to buy a Coke at a store, it's gone through about 1 million different people that in R&D and production and advertising and marketing. Whereas it's me.
Yeah.
It's what I want to talk about. It's been what I've been working on, and kind of like that's the genesis of the entire thing.
The product is me, myself, and, how I perceive you guys.
Speaking of the product, have you put that entire special to rest now, and are you working on fully new material, or are you still mixing it in?
I still have to mix in some of it. It's funny. I got to talk to so many, there's so many comics that I really look up to. Some of them that I've gotten to be around that are very famous, like the Beth Stellings of the world, who I got to work with again recently. And then there are local comics that I really look up to that I've talked to about it, that they all have different takes on how you handle like a special coming out after. One told me that like they really are okay with the evergreen material, which is like, there's some of these bits I'm going to just do forever.
Okay, yeah.
Like these are just some of my favorite bits. So I'm always writing new stuff, but some of these are going to always exist. I enjoy doing them. The audience loves them. I'm going to keep doing them. And then someone like Beth Stelling told me, she was like, she just burns it all. Like after the special's out, she just walks on stage the next time and just does a completely new 45, which to me, I mean, maybe not 45, but like to me, that's like, I wish I had like that skill set. I do not. I like to think that I'm always churning ideas and working on things, but I've probably got like it's been 3 months now. I've probably got like a new 15, 20.
Okay. I mean,
but that is also at times it's held together by old things until I still have these tent poles and I'm just kind of building around those tent poles. And then once this thing's strong enough, it will stand on its own. And I'm still like you said with the special, I'm very narrative driven. And I can feel, and I haven't spoken about it out loud yet because I'm still letting it find itself.
right.
But I can feel like there was definitely a theme with the special. There was definitely the thing about mental health and drug addiction and the death of my grandmother. And a lot of it was about loss and dealing with loss and coping with loss, the negative outcomes of going through these things and how you have to cope and deal with them and try to get better.
And I think it was very important that the theme was very solid, and it may seem like there was more than one theme, but the overarching theme of the entire thing was maybe loss and how we can find the funny in all of that, because it helped all of us as audience members connect with you, going like, yeah, we've all lost parents and we've all lost grandparents and people that we loved in our life. It may not be a grandmother, it could be a grandfather, but I could connect to that because I know exactly how it feels. And for us, who aren't comedians, it's very hard sometimes to find laughter in some of the toughest things that we go through. So that's why we turn to comedians, and that's why I liked your style of comedy and still love your style of comedy. Is it's narrative based. It's almost all of it is from your life. I remember from our first podcast where we talked about a lot of these things that you had gone through as a kid, and I saw it translate into this special, and I was like, this guy knows what he's doing. He definitely has a solid foundation, and I know he's not lying because I spent almost 3 hours talking to the guy about all of these things before I saw him do it on a special.
Yeah.
So it really does kind of like solidify what you were doing and how you were presenting it to the world. It's cool. It's the best that I can kind of like, it was really cool to see kind of like this journey that you went through.
Yeah. And it's like, and it feels good to, I was thinking about it on the drive here, I'm trying to like, just putting a pin in it and letting it exist and trying to move on to the next thing. And the next thing, I think you came and saw me recently when I was featuring for Harlan Williams.
Yes.
Which was very cool. I mean, like Half Baked, I remember watching Half Baked when I was a kid and just thinking it was like one of the funniest movies I'd ever seen.
And I've seen Harlan 3 times live.
Oh,
now.
really?
Yeah.
I'd never seen him before.
Addison Improv, Skankfest, and the most recently, I think he was at Heine's? Or was he at Addison?
Yeah, we're at Heine's Dallas.
Yeah. So I've seen him 3 different times live, and the man has never done the same material.
Oh, really?
Ever.
Because I've never seen him before, so I didn't know. And I love that he had a lot of little tricks. I think as comedians, like we're very, at least I am very highly aware of like the mechanics that they do. Like there's little tricks that every comedian has that are a little different from the other guys. That are the really good comics. Like they all have these little delivery systems that they use.
What I love most about him is, if you pay attention, it's very hard to discern crowd work and his actual set. He just flows so seamlessly in and out of these moments, and I know why he does it. It took me 3 times of seeing him to actually understand why he does it. It keeps the audience so very engaged because his stuff is so left field sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
and he'll just be like, "Hey, guy, you." And that is enough for all of us to be like, "What's going on? What? Why is it funny? Hold on." What? And then it's back into the material, and you're like, "What? What just happened?"
See, that's a great point too, because crowd work, I think a live show, a special is a little different, but like a real live show, when you're good at them, like you learn how to. I always refer to throwing the ball in the air. Like you learn how to keep the ball in the air. And whenever you're like, I'll do crowd work oftentimes, but I'm not doing crowd work to try to circumvent material. I'm not doing crowd work to try to circumvent anything other than keeping everybody as engaged as possible.
Right.
You know, because whenever you start talking to some people in the audience, it creates this vibe with the audience that makes them think, oh, he might talk to me next. I'm going to pay attention because I don't want to get caught not paying attention because that feels embarrassing. I think it's just a natural thing that people have in their body, in their mind. You know, it's like if you're talking to this table, the table next to them are like, oh, shit, okay, well, what's he saying? Because he might come at me next or ask me a question next.
And that actually happened to me very recently. Tory Bond, the comedian.
Tory Bond?
Yeah,
I'm not familiar with Tory.
New York comedian. He's very, very funny, edgy guy, and I think he kind of like TikTok and Instagram really helped him become much bigger and bigger. But he's very, very funny.
Yeah.
And he's also very good at the crowd work stuff. Like he's known for it to the point where like him heckling back is probably some of the funniest shit that ever happens.
Yeah.
And we were just sitting in the crowd, and I don't like being up front. I like being all the way in the back, out of sight, out of mind. But
Yeah.
I was with my wife and a couple of friends, and so it was just like a group of us, and we ended up just sitting all the way up in the front. And we had this interaction out of nowhere. He was like, "What do I do in Dallas?" And I don't know why. I said, "We can take you shooting." And it just kind of went through. I wasn't expecting it, but like it was fun to kind of have the whole thing happen and the interaction, and it was like I could tell people around me, not my group, but others were just kind of like, "Oh fuck, I hope I'm not next."
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it was funny to me the way he talked about me killing kids and all this other stuff. Obviously, none of it is true. It was just hilarious to hear.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just was like, all right, this is awesome. This is the funniest thing that's ever happened to me personally. And it was cool to see. But I could tell, I know exactly what you mean. Like other people may kind of like have that cringe moment of like, please don't talk to us.
Yeah. But people being nervous, and I experience it in my own life, whenever you're nervous, like it kind of keeps you like, it doesn't make you better at anything, but it kind of keeps you like engaged, like, okay, well, I've got to focus now because something, there's chaos is approaching.
Yeah, like something could happen at any moment. It's like that heightened sense of awareness.
Yeah.
And I think, not about Tory, but going back to Harland, the way he does it is everybody's fair game.
Uh-huh.
So like, it doesn't matter if you're sitting in the back or in the front. If he wants to mess with you, he'll mess with you, and he just does it so eloquently. It's a beautiful thing to see.
And you're watching a guy that's been doing it for like 30 plus years.
Yeah,
So,
and I
like,
don't think he has a special, right? I don't think he's ever taken the
so.
special.
I mean, I feel like he was, so big with the movies that I think he probably wasn't trying to tour and go up as much.
I mean, I fell in
love.
love with the guy after I saw Half Baked as a kid, and
Yeah,
I think all of us did when we saw that. And this was, I saw Half Baked before I even knew what stand-up was. This is how long ago it was for me. I was like, this is just funny comedian, like comic actors of the time. And Chappelle and him and like everybody in that movie, you're like, oh shit, I get to see you guys do a completely different style of comedy that's so much more raw and intimate because it's a lot of small rooms and, just hanging out with kind of like a group of people.
Yeah.
And there's no producers and a script or a director to kind of like give the flow. You give the flow as the comedian on the stage.
And it's weird for me, too, to be in those situations that the comics on my level are hopefully constantly in. It's like where you're in a green room and you're doing the same work as somebody you like grew up watching.
Right.
Because I don't really see myself as like, I have no really big self-importance. I don't see myself as some sort of, celebrity, but to be like in that orbit all the time, it's like a strange thing. Like when you walk into work on Monday, like, how was your weekend? I'm like, it was good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I don't know. It's a hard thing to deal with sometimes. Like yeah.
You know the comedian Des O'Neill?
Yeah, of course. Des is phenomenal.
One of my favorite things that I've ever heard a comedian say is when, and I won't ruin the joke, but I'll give you like...
Oh, the FedEx thing. Like, I used to be somebody.
Yeah,
I was somebody.
I'm somebody tonight. Yeah. Tomorrow I'm nobody.
Yeah.
It makes me laugh every time I hear it. Because yeah, he's right. Like on that stage, he gets full undivided attention. He's that good. But probably the next day at work, nobody knows that, Dez was just murdering on a stage.
Nobody gives a shit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nobody gives a shit.
And you said celebrity, and I wonder, do comedians, even the largest of comedians, do they consider themselves celebrities, or do they not want that label because it's really like Hollywood? And I don't know.
I
Is
think
that
once
something
you
that they
reach a
want?
certain point of fame, like you're a celebrity. You know what I mean? Like maybe not. I mean, I guess it depends. I mean, yeah, I think they are celebrities. You got the pictures of these guys up here, and the thing, like, these guys are huge celebrities. But it's weird to be like, there's somebody out there that's got an Eddie Murphy story. It's like, oh, I used to work with Eddie Murphy all the time.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure
but
there's
that person's not famous.
Yeah, and it's also having to recognize that, there's maybe thousands of comedians, hundreds of comedians that have come and gone. Only a very few really are recognizable names that stay within the cultural zeitgeist for a long time or continue to be relevant and have that celebrity, I guess, accolade.
Yeah.
Most of them, you may not know who they are, and they will be really funny and could sell out shows and theaters and the whole thing, but they're not on TV maybe, or they don't do a huge podcast and have, millions of followers like a Tom Segura would have. Or
it's weird now this day and age too, because you can have you can be big, like where you can go around the country and sell out, and you're right, and not be like a celebrity. Like people that are into comedy, that are into it. Like I think Tom Dillon, I'm sure, can go to the mall and nobody's going to bother him.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like maybe a few people would run into him, but for the most part, I think a lot of those guys could walk around.
There's a few names like Eddie Murphy. I think anywhere he goes, everybody's going to know him.
Yeah, that's a different level of celebrity.
He was also, a very critically acclaimed actor, a comedic actor that did some of the funniest shit that we've ever seen. Like, I mean, Beverly Hills Cop still is one of my favorite, just like no nonsense, don't deal, like there isn't a lot to think about. It's just a funny movie.
Yeah.
And I watched it like maybe 2 or 3 months ago, and I still found it to be really good and funny.
Are you enamored by celebrity at all? Like, do you find it intriguing?
I find the pursuit of it intriguing. I don't find celebrity itself to be intriguing. I feel like there's so many pitfalls of being a celebrity.
Yeah.
That giving up your privacy to a certain degree, and almost always maybe it seems like you're chasing something that's unobtainable.
Yeah.
Even if you are at the height of your career, you're like, I could do more and I could do more. I feel like that's not for everyone.
Yeah.
As much as I love doing this podcast, I don't want to be an influencer in any way, shape, or form, nor do I want to be a celebrity. I just want to have these beautiful conversations, and if it becomes something big one day, great, but this is the important part for me, not being recognized.
And I'm the same way. It's like because I was just thinking about it for myself. Like I am, I guess in some ways I get enamored with celebrity. Like not in the fact that they are a celebrity, but I'm such a process junkie. Like so, playing music and doing comedy, I'm very like I would listen to interviews with like the Kendrick Lamars and these other artists that I really like because I'm very fascinated by the process and how they think about what it is that they do.
Right.
Now,
yeah, I'm the same way.
What it is about like their private life or what it is about who they're dating and all these things, like I don't care at all. But I'm very fascinated in how their mind works.
I think it was like, remember tabloid magazines? I don't know if they still exist, if anybody cares
anymore. You can
anymore.
still see them at the grocery store sometimes.
Like the Inquirer and People and all these, they were everywhere back in the day, and that was the thing. I was less interested in any of that and more interested in exactly what you said. Like thinking about Kendrick Lamar as an example, his thought process and the way he writes and the way he puts words together and creates this divine flow in some instances for me is amazing.
Yeah.
And I always wonder, like, how is a person on that wavelength? How do you think in that abstract that you can reach millions, if not hundreds of millions of, ears and continue to just perform at this level?
I remember right before I started doing comedy, I was like, but I've been writing in different mediums my whole life. And I was, whenever Good Kid in Mad City was out whenever I first found him. And then it was right before To Pimp a Butterfly came out. And I remember sitting at the office, and that's right when I had found genius.com. And I remember reading the lyrics on Genius while I was listening to Pimp a Butterfly, and he keeps doing that poem, and then at the end you find out it's written to Tupac. And I just remember like the way the whole album played out. It was like reading it and listening to it at the same time. I remember at the end, like when I finally got to the last track, like tearing up a little bit, like because it was just so beautifully done. And it's just you're experiencing something that you didn't really, that like you weren't necessarily a part of that lifestyle, but to just have somebody take you through it in such a way that you could like you were saying with the special, that you could relate to it, despite the fact like, well, I have like there are things here that I can bend and mold where this fits my life too.
Yeah, and
even though it's not like maybe some specific points, I don't get.
Which is okay, because I'm not supposed to get all of it because it's your life and not my life. But if there is such a disconnect that nobody can even relate to it, then it's just not going to work, because the obscure that is only to you will not translate in something that we understand as an audience member. And I think the same goes with music. You have different types of, there's music that is, let's say, pop culture music. And then there's music that tells a story and that really can connect with you on a very deep level. I think there's fewer of those artists than there are poppy music, like just everybody can go with the dance to music, versus a Kendrick Lamar or an Eminem or
just thinking about it, like to me,
I don't know, the Scorpions, or even going back to like Pink Floyd and Frank Zappa, Led Zeppelin. There was an actual story that was being told. There was a lot of intimate moments of that person's life or that band's life that you were kind of getting a backdoor view into.
Yeah,
that's cool.
I think there's a lot of music that's like more pop driven or beat driven, that that's more hooky and chorus driven, and I like that. There's a very much like, hey, I'm just kind of vibing, and I'm just kind of like, I kind of enjoy the way this sounds, and I just kind of like the melody.
Yeah,
it got me. And then there's music where like you listen to, you're like, I'm trying to fill a void. I've got a puzzle piece missing, and I think maybe it might be in this song, and it's not. Well, and it is to some degree, but like there's just like, and I think I always gravitated more towards, like, you can't always be there, but for the most part, like that's the kind of art and the kind of lyrical and the kind of comedy that I really enjoy.
Which I think a lot of people who would come to see your type of comedy would be on that level playing. Like, if I was let's say take Stephen Wright for an example, he's just a bunch of one-liners, right?
Yeah.
It's not exactly a story being told. It actually isn't. It's a ton of one-liners, right?
Yeah.
That's what he's doing. Kind of like Mark Norman has that style of comedy for current. But let's say you go to Shane Gillis, his latest special. It was hilarious. Loved it. But it was a very nice story about family and about America itself and the history of America, and him going to, the George Washington Memorial and all that stuff. And you're like, I like this a lot.
Yeah.
I like Stephen Wright too. That's why he's up here, because he did one-liners in a way that I'd never seen done before. But I almost always gravitate towards the storytellers more.
Yeah, and I'm very much the same way, and I think the storytellers are what pull us in, because like the Normans and the Stephen Wrights, and like I think I prefer Norman more than Stephen Wright, honestly, just because I think Norman does like let you in a little bit more.
Yeah,
like, it's a lot of one-liners, but you also learn stuff about Mark whenever you're listening to it.
I agree with you. I got to see him at Skankfest perform 2 different times, and it was hilarious, and he was so good.
He's so
good.
I
just love his way of delivery and the way he speaks. It is him.
I was working with him in San Antonio recently, and I've worked with him several times over a long span of years, and it was cool to see the growth. Where I feel like when I first started working with him, it was like he would kind of stick with the same formula the whole time, to the point where even though it was super funny and hitting so hard, like the audience would kind of get tired. And then seeing him in San Antonio, he had changed it to where at the end, like, he just kind of opens everybody up to questions.
Like a Q&A?
Like a Q&A, but not exactly. Like, people kind of yell stuff at him. And the dude just had a line for every single. And some nights you would see it and it looks like it's magic, and you would see it and you're like, okay, some of these, like, people are kind of yelling the same topics at him. And then constantly somebody would just throw something that nobody else had said the whole weekend, and he would just immediately have a line for it. It's just super impressive. Super impressive mind.
Do you watch when Rogan has him, Ari Shaffir, and Shane Gillis when they do Protect Our Parks? You have to watch. I think there are 7, 8 of them at this point.
Oh, really?
It's just the four of them hanging out in Joe's podcast studio. Obviously, Jamie's there too, producing the whole thing. But it's just them getting completely ripped and just having fun for like 3+ hours. But like everybody says it, Mark never misses a beat.
Yeah.
Ever. Like somebody will say something, he's always got a quick, sharp, witty response. It's these one-liners, and they're the funniest thing. But it's worth checking out just for that, to see like you can see it over the 6 or 7 episodes, and they're done like every few months or so.
Yeah,
there's like this an evolution to him too, and it's really hilarious to watch.
I think Mark and I are similar in a certain way, where being around him, where it's like it takes me when I'm in different, like I feel like I can always survive any kind of situation, but like the more comfortable I get, like the better I get.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I think comics are the same way. It's like comics are the same way. It's like, man, this guy's always on and this guy's got it. But like the more comfortable you get in every room, like the easier it is to just kind of be.
So what gives you that comfort? Is it time put in? Is it repetition? What is it that kind of like gets you in a more comfortable place as you've progressed?
I think repetition, and also like I have like ADD, and I think I have ADD. I've never been diagnosed with it, but I struggle to focus. And I think whenever I walk into a room, like a lot of like childhood, I don't know. I prescribe these things motives, and I don't know that any of them are true at all. But I think if you were around a lot of like bad shit growing up, it's like every room I walk into, it's like I become very like, well, there's the exit. This is how these tables are set up. It's like my mind has to kind of categorize everything before I can kind of just like breathe.
Right. You're like I have something. I do actually have ADHD. It was formally diagnosed and all this stuff, but I have like this acute awareness that I've even been told is like, why are you listening to 3 different conversations at the same time?
Yeah.
Like I could be talking to you, and in my peripheral be hearing 2 other conversations and catching enough of it to kind of like understand what's happening. I don't know why that I do this. I can't control it in any way. I wish I could. I wish I was like other people where just like, oh, cool, we're talking about this. Let's talk about this.
Yeah.
For me, it's constantly going like, I have to pull myself back and be like, no, you need to focus on this.
Yes.
This is what you're doing right now. Don't worry about the exits. Nothing's going to happen.
Yeah.
Hell, it's Texas. Everybody's got a gun, including you. So what are you worried about?
Yeah. And I wouldn't even, if you ask me, are you worried about something? I go, no.
Yeah.
But my
here.
brain, just my back of my brain is just going like, we got to figure all this out so we can sit here and be comfortable. And then, I'm listening to several different conversations, and I'm thinking about how I would respond to each thing that's being said by different people. And I don't know why I do that.
I've spent enough time in my own head, with the help of some psychedelics, to kind of land on an answer, at least personally for me. It's a severe trust issue.
Okay.
And it's rooted in childhood.
Mm-hmm.
I understand where it comes from, but me not being able to fully trust anyone has also become this superpower, maybe, of like always having this heightened state of awareness and always being on your toes.
Yeah.
It sucks. I don't like it, to be honest with you, because it messes with your head on a constant basis.
Yeah.
Like my friends that say they can turn their head completely off and just focus on something like just scrolling TikTok or, I don't know, watching something on TV. I'm like, how do you do that?
Yeah.
How do you actually do that?
I found the comfort of other people. Like if I'm with somebody I feel comfortable around, like I can sit down and watch TV.
Okay.
But like if I'm alone by myself, I'm like playing a musical instrument, or I'm doodling with words in my journal. I'm fucking with my phone, even though like I'm watching a TV show and I'm still messing with my phone. Like I just have to like, but if I'm sitting with somebody else that I feel comfortable with, like it's much easier for me.
Yeah, I know.
Which
exactly
almost implies I can like trust someone else more than I can trust myself, maybe. I don't know. My brain just needs to be running 2 laps. It needs to be running 2 side tracks. Like the highway traffic, it's going both directions for it to just be sitting there.
I know exactly how you feel. And I think a lot of people, and it's sad that a lot of people probably can connect to that and relate to that.
I used to say forever, when I was on the road for years, I would always joke around that like every club I would go to work that I'd never worked before, because typically you're doing shows Thursday through Saturday. And I would say like every club that would book me, I would show up on Thursday and just bomb. Like not bomb because like you want to be a professional, but like I would hate my set. And I would leave every Thursday being like, oh, you guys will see tomorrow. And then like Friday and Saturday I would do great. And I remember I was joking myself. I was like, why can't I just do that on Thursday? Why can't I just kill it on Thursday instead of having to wait till Friday to Saturday? But I think it was just, it's a new club for me. So I'm walking in and I'm walking on stage on Thursday and I'm looking around the room trying to figure out, trying to decipher something that's not there. I'm trying to figure out the vibe. I'm trying to figure out where the tables are. And it's just like, I think it's just the ADHD in my brain. And then once I get to it, like now, like I kind of know everything. So it's boring to me. The layout of the room is boring. I know where all this stuff is. I know where that goes. I know who the waiters are. I know what the flow of the traffic is.
Right.
Then all of a sudden my brain's like, well, I'm bored with that. And it's like, cool. Well, meet me here with the thing I'm doing where we're talking to them right now. If you could do that, that'd be fucking great.
It almost, I don't know if you get this feeling, but I almost feel like there's two of me in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And like one is always struggling to get the attention of the other, going like, I know you want to just do your thing, but this is way more important right now. You really need to focus on this for the next X amount of time.
I've said so many times that my brain, sometimes it feels like, it's like, you know, when I used to live in Austin, my buddy, there was like a communal apartment where it's like, you know, there's the shared living room, then there's 4 different bedrooms.
Okay.
And it's like, the inside of my brain feels like that way. Like sometimes we're all hanging out in the living room, but then like somebody's like, I'm going to my room. Someone else is like, I'm going to my room. And I'm like, hey, can we be in here as a family right now and just focus on this one thing? But you know, people are going to their own room and they're playing their guitar in this room. They're writing bits in this other room. They're at work in this room, and the other one's thinking about relationships in the other room. And they're all just like, and sometimes I feel the need to send people to their room. You know, it almost feels like you're like the parents in your own brain.
Yeah. I know exactly how you feel.
Yeah.
And it's there's only certain things that I guess brings my head completely together.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is this.
Yeah.
Where even though I will get sidetracked sometimes in my head, very quickly, the version of me that is getting sidetracked is the one that's going like, wait, forget that shit. This is way more important right now. And it's like an instantaneous, it's almost like a millisecond. Whereas other times it could just be like hours of my brain just like traveling somewhere. And you're like, dude, God damn it, come back here. I need you right now.
Yeah.
That and doing Legos for some reason.
Legos.
I can build Legos for hours on end. And I will always have like a podcast or something on TV or something in my ear. But like that, the combination of an audible something in my ear and physically doing like building a Lego set, I guess it brings both of us together for some weird reason. And this I understand is because I truly love doing this. Yeah. It's something that I love doing more than anything I've ever done. So all of me wants to be here.
I'm the same way. Like I play guitar, and that helps me. It's like, feels like driving, where it's like my hands and my brain kind of start doing their own little thing.
Hang on one second.
Yeah.
I know what that is, and I want to turn it off real quick. I am so sorry about that.
Oh, you're good.
Stupid robot vacuum is on a schedule, and I forgot to turn it off.
The Roomba's trying to get a guest spot on the show. That's great.
He's trying to ruin a very interesting moment in the conversation.
But yeah, these things, I've even done it with stand-up comedy, where I've been on stage and it's going great, and I'll hear my brain go like, what do you want to get to eat after this? And I'm like, hey.
Hang on now.
Yeah. Like, we're really in the middle. Like, I don't know what else could be happening other than a fist fight where you would feel more of a need to fucking pay attention than standing on stage in front of like 300 people.
And I thought that would be one of those things, like the adrenaline rush, being on a stage and the public speaking and all that stuff. Would it not be kind of like the main focus of attention?
It wears off, you know. It's like a drug, almost. Like it's like whenever I was new and I was trying to memorize everything so hard.
Right.
And I'm almost kind of drifting back in that territory a little bit, because I have so many loose ideas and I'm trying to work them out and I'm trying to find a theme. So there's like this weird thing of like letting it be loose and then trying to get like, it's hard to like be like, hey, let's let it be loose and then tighten it up at the same time. But I'm kind of like trusting the process with myself artistically of being like, hey, like when I was doing the Harlan Williams weekend, I was very excited. I was very happy. Well, I had some weird things with that weekend, because you came to one of those shows. Like I was opening up and like doing the mass shooting thing. where I like pretend to shoot the audience and kind of making fun of a mass shooting that happened very close to here. And I'm not making fun of the mass shooting.
Was it the Uvalde stuff?
The Allen one.
Allen one, yes,
the
that's
Allen
right.
Mall one, because it was
Yeah,
just
yeah,
the
that's right,
closest
that's right,
one.
that's
You know,
right.
any comedy club you're at, you can choose the closest mass shooting and speak about it, and it'll be relevant. But the first,
Which is unfortunate, right? It happens so goddamn often that you can be in any city in America and be like, yeah, there was one 100 miles away. I can talk about
just
this.
Google mass shooting, and there will be. You can do sort by distance, and you can find the closest one to you.
What a sad
to
state.
reference. And I was like, I was doing that, and I was doing like the finger gun blasting at them. And the first night I did it, I was trying to get them upset. I was trying to get them like riled up with me a little bit. And they're just clapping, they're just loving it. And then the new bit I was doing, the new chunk I was doing is about suicide and how I daydream about it, which is like a very hard topic to broach with the audience. It's something I've been trying to work on for a long time. Like for years, I've had this idea and wanting to speak about it on stage. But it's not like, people say like in comedy, like it's weird to me whenever people are like, oh, I really push the audience and they're talking about, oh, fuck Trump, or they're talking about politics, or they're talking about their opinions about that. And it's like, dude, have you ever tried to talk about mental health? Like that's really, to me, like that's a harder thing to push with the audience, because like people are like, oh, I'm actually uncomfortable about this.
And you're not really pushing the audience in Texas. If you look at Texas, people want to think Texas is all red. It's not. It's kind of like divided 50-50 between red and blue.
Yeah, well,
Texas
when
is
you're in
kind
the
of one
city,
of these
at
like
least.
purple places. If
Yeah.
you think, well, yeah, but where are you going to be doing comedy? Not in Tyler or Lubbock. You're going to be in Austin, San Antonio, Houston, Dallas, the bigger cities where you've got enough people that give a damn and want to actually come out and see live comedy.
Yeah.
I know those smaller gigs exist and everybody does it when you're on the road and, you're trying to figure it out. But if you're going to be on a big stage, let's say you're headlining or you're the feature, you're probably in a bigger club.
Yeah. And it's hard to but I was doing that. And then so I'm opening up with me pretending like I'm doing a mass shooting, but I'm shooting at the audience and they're clapping and loving it. And then 10 minutes later, I'm doing a 5-minute chunk about suicide that ends with me literally having a gun in my mouth.
Yeah.
And they're just, it's getting.
Figuratively, let's preface that by saying finger gun, not actual gun. Stop.
Yeah.
Don't get the wrong idea, people.
Figuratively, I'm putting a gun in my mouth and saying I have no more room for negativity in my life. And it's getting an applause break. And in the moment, I was happy. And as a writer of comedy, it's like I was selling stuff after the show. And everybody the main bit everybody wanted to come talk to me about was the new stuff. So it was like, that made me very happy. But then it's like, I remember driving home that night. All of a sudden it clicked in. I was like, I opened up with me shooting them, and then 10 minutes later I have a gun in my mouth and everybody's just clapping and loving it. And I was like, that's kind of dark when you think about it. Like it's like in a good way. Like it's one of those things where it's like, this is what I wanted. But like whenever the more you zoom out, you're like, oh, that was kind of weird. Like we're at a weird place in our country, and we're at a weird place with mental health.
It could also be kind of a Texas type of a thing. I don't know. I could be very wrong about this, but I don't know if you're, let's say, West or East Coast, if it would have the same reception.
Yeah.
They might, even though people might want to laugh, they might be hesitant to think is it okay for me to laugh? And that type of self filtering that we've begun to do in society also aggravates me so much. Like, be you. If you're going to laugh at a suicide joke, laugh at the goddamn suicide joke. It doesn't mean that you are pro-suicide in any way.
Yeah.
Anything, you're the opposite of it.
And
you're,
me too.
You're pro-suicide prevention.
And I understand if someone's been affected by it. And it's like whenever you have these, to me at least, I think for comedy, whenever you have these ideas that you want to express, you kind of put them in a box.
Yeah.
And if it's a tough subject, like something like suicide, for the audience, there is a way to word things. And there's little things that you slowly add in over time, because originally the idea is just you in your own head. And then as you release the idea and you're sharing it with somebody else, even whenever you have to have a tough conversation with somebody, you start kind of punching holes in that box so that the idea inside of it can breathe.
Right. Yeah.
And you still got the tape on it because it's your idea, but you're kind of punching holes in it so it can breathe. And then finally, whenever the audience is cool with it, like you kind of open it up and go, look, this is what it is. They're like, oh, we love that. We like that. But it's like, it is a process to it.
And so let's go back to that. When you did the suicide joke with Harlan Williams, and then, it's been a few months after that, have you refined it in any way? Has it changed?
Yeah.
Has it become I don't do the pew pew thing and then go into it, or I don't put the gun in my head at the end. Is there anything that has really kind of like, because here's the other thing about you is if you were to shave, nobody would know your age at all, and nobody would actually think you've been in comedy for 9+ years because you just look so young.
Okay. It's all the drugs and smoking.
And I'm saying it in the best possible way. You know,
Yeah.
like it's
Well,
a
no, I'm 39, so I appreciate that.
So yeah, it's a compliment. Like if
Yeah.
you shaved, you'd look like you're in your late 20s, and they're like, "When the hell did this guy have a chance to do 10 years of comedy?"
Yeah.
And then talk about suicide in that way. So it's like, I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like, how does that routine that you did, that it hit and kind of like evolve for you?
The way that bit has evolved is kind of how I see the next hour evolving, which is I've started putting these little things in it that are more representative of, like you said, like it was so funny. I was talking to, like, I don't know if I can get this to where I want it, but like I started putting things in it where I'm talking about, like, you know, you have to embrace your depression. And I've started putting other examples of it in there. And it's more about trying to uplift people that have, you know, mental health. If you have really bad mental health, which I do oftentimes, it's like it is a disability in a certain way. So I've started trying to put other things in it. You know, it's like you got to be more positive about things. You know, it's like you're not a handicap. You got to park up front, you know?
Right.
Like I've started putting all these little things in it. And it's more about as it's going to keep stretching out. Because I also have this thing about Tourette's, about a friend that had Tourette's. Because I grew up with multiple people that had Tourette's, which sounds like a weird thing to say, but I did. And it's kind of... And it starts talking about, I start talking about how, like, I have a friend and she has Tourette's, which is stress. Like, and I realized at some point that the saddest thing about her having Tourette's is she's beautiful. And for some reason that makes it sadder. Yeah. You know, because like that's how we treat people with disability in this country. It's like if you're beautiful or if you're ugly and you have a disability, everybody's like, that sucks. But if you're gorgeous and you have a disability, everybody's like, oh, what a fucking tragedy.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's like you're trying to like build it up to where you can present the mirror to the audience and be like, I'm not making fun of people with disabilities. I'm making fun of how you treat people with disabilities, how we all treat people with disabilities.
You're right. Well, like, I guess if you say somebody has a disability, almost always there's a projection that goes into your head of what you see or what you think that person should look like.
Yeah.
And then you see the person and you're like, oh, I was so damn wrong.
No, for sure.
And it makes you feel worse.
Yeah.
Because you're like, was I really that bad of a person that I thought just because you had, let's say, Tourette's syndrome, you also had to be ugly or overweight or something to that, you know, like a big mole or something. Yeah. Something weird like that has to also exist.
I think the big thing that as I'm adding pieces to it and I'm finding the new material, one of the things I think I've that's changed about me in comedy the last 3 years is a lot of times I will come up with an idea of something that I really want to say. Like something that bothers me or something that I find very unique and different, and then I start trying to make it funny instead of like having a funny idea and then trying to build out. Like I kind of have something I want to say, and then like because I have a thing right now about like I have a 3-year-old kid who at this moment does not have health insurance.
Okay.
And which is about to get fixed, but I was just thinking about it. I was like, it's crazy to me that in America, like a 3-year-old kid cannot have health insurance. But like a 93 Corolla cannot leave the lot without at least liability.
Yeah, it's fucked up, but it's also
fucked up.
It's funny.
Yeah, but it's not funny yet. But like I'm gonna get it there. But like,
but I can see that there's something that will end up being a hilarious punchline at some point. But even just saying it like that, you're like, oh shit, he's right. I can't actually buy a jalopy without having some sort of insurance on it because I guess it's to protect the other people on the road that have the nicer cars. But when it comes down to children, why aren't they just automatically given health insurance until they are functioning adults in society?
Yeah.
Why is that such a big deal?
Exactly.
And it's stupid, to be completely honest with you. It seems like a country with, you know, the sheer force and the size of a country like this would be like, makes sense that all of our kids should be healthy and like going through the process without worrying about a boo-boo.
Yeah.
But for a parent, you worry about the damn boo-boo because you're like, if it gets infected, I'm fucked.
Yeah.
And, you know, but like if your car breaks down, you still have the insurance, but you got to deal with fixing it, right?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
You know what I mean? Like it's one of these weird dichotomies of life. I was like, why do we value inanimate objects over children?
Yeah, and so that's
in this society.
And that's one of those things, like, because, like, and I've said it a couple times on stage, like, and people, I just get like oh, we agree with you, but like, there's not a punchline yet. I'm trying to find it, and it will find its legs eventually.
So is that how it works for you? Is kind of like messing around with an idea on stage and just kind of like working out the material until it hits the way you want it to?
I would prefer that I have it more in line and everything is good to go when you go up on stage, and it's kind of bop, 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 and then you just take a tag out, or you replace something, or you add to it. But it's different with everything. Like lately, I really do find if I sit down and I kind of just start writing about some part of my life, that the further I go, eventually my voice comes on, and eventually something happens.
Okay.
You know, I was writing the other day. I was just like, I'm constantly searching for these ideas in my head, and I was just writing about when I was a kid, and I used to play in these punk bands and Deep Ellum, and how I was at this punk show one time at this club that's, you know, about the size of 2 of these rooms, and everybody was and I grew up poor, so everybody's so packed in this room, and this is back in the like early 2000s, late 90s, when Doc Martens were a huge thing. And for me, I
remember Doc Martens. Yeah, it was like the counterculture or alternate culture would be in Doc Martens a lot.
But see, that's the thing. They called them that, but they were so fucking expensive. Like I remember like trying to get my grandparents like, hey, can I get some Doc Martens? They were like $120 whenever I was in like middle school, which was like an astronomical price.
Which most people don't understand. They were like, at least us as kids didn't get it. They were steel toe boots, but they were meant for like work. Like,
yeah.
Dudes in construction, dudes that could lose their toes if something like really heavy fell on it. And that's why they paid $120 for it, because it gave them protection in their field of work.
Yeah, yeah.
And it wasn't until I became an adult and I got a job working at a biotech place, and they required you to have steel toe boots.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, shit, man. Now I understand why these things actually matter, and why the comfort of a Doc Marten mattered so much, because you're in them for like 12 hours a day on your feet.
Yeah.
And like us as kids, we were just like, well, this is supposed to be like the stylish shit to wear, right?
Yeah. And as a kid, you're like impervious to injury.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, like I was on my feet all day. That doesn't bother me.
Nah, it's like your bones are jelly. Who gives a shit? Nothing's going to happen. You know what I mean? Like nobody cared. But I could definitely understand how $120 in the late 90s, early 2000s is a lot of money.
But I remember being at this punk show, and they oversold it. It was sold out, but they just kept letting people in if they were just paying the door guy. And the room was so packed, and everybody, and I was a young kid at the time. Like I was barely old enough to be in the room. And I remember the crowd was kind of moving and shifting. And I remember I just kept thinking, like, if I fall down, like I'm dead. If I fall down, I'm going to get trampled to death. And looking down and seeing all these Doc Martens and just thinking, I'll be damned if I'm going to die by a shoe that I cannot afford. Like, what a terrible fucking way to go. And so it's like,
see, that's hilarious right there to me.
See, and I thought it was too,
so funny.
But that's just me writing about my life, and then my voice turning on, and then like, so now I've kind of logged that. And at some point, something will come up, and I will find a story, and I will warp it, and I will change it, and I will take this piece, and I will just put it into a story where, like, there was a funny story that happens, and all of a sudden, I'm able to shift this and put this into it. But, like, I kind of got to wait for that to, not wait for it to happen. I got to keep doing what I'm doing. But it'll get there. But that's kind of the process has changed quite a bit. But I like trying to find these things I really want to say and then trying to build on them.
So when you say the process has changed quite a bit, what was it before this current, not an evolution, but current version of how you find the funny? Because it's so interesting to me that every comedian has their own way. You know, like no two comedians will make a joke the same way. Some write, some just do it on stage, and some do a combination. What you do is completely unique. It was like life stories, figure it out. The funny will come some point. Don't know yet, but I'm going to keep doing this. I don't know. It's interesting. So what was your process prior?
Prior, I think whenever you're new, I think the process changes because your needs evolve as a comedian. Like whenever you're new, you always want to be killing, but whenever you're new, like you're just like, you'll go up there and just throw 30 things at the audience, even though you've got 5 minutes, just hoping one of them hits. And then once you have more self-awareness and you're more comfortable with who you are, or at least me, you kind of start evolving into like, there's certain jokes I had whenever I was newer that like they might, if I did them tonight, like maybe they work. Like the audience hits, they like it, but I don't care about it. Like it carries no weight with me.
Okay.
It doesn't really hold much value to me.
But does it remain in your Rolodex?
A lot of it's gone. a lot of that stuff is gone.
Because it doesn't really matter to you that much.
Yeah, and even whenever you say it, all of a sudden it loses like this oomph.
Oh, interesting. I never thought of it that way.
And you don't see the exchange rate. Like you can't see, the audience can't see, and you can't see what's between you two and why for some reason it just fell a little flat. Like I don't know if you've ever been like dating a girl and towards the end of the relationship, you go to leave, you give her a kiss, and you can tell you both just don't mean it.
Yeah, high school, college, that kind of dating. Yeah, a lot of that is a familiar undertone of you almost. Even not the kiss, like I can distinctly remember conversations where you're just like, do either of us give a shit at this point? Like, or are we just waiting for that singular event to happen to, put a pin in the end of this relationship?
Yeah.
Neither one of us wants to call it quits, but both of us are just hoping that an argument manifests itself out of some bullshit that we can be like, aha, fuck you.
Exactly. And then sometimes I'll pull out and it's like, and they do. And there's just something like neither one of you are ready to it's not like they just turn their cheek. They still kiss you back. But
right.
You can tell like, oh, I guess we're both not that into this. And so you try to not have those things, you want to, with the on it, you want to have a kiss and it feels like it really means something, like you want to feel better after it, feel more alive after it. And for me, it has to carry some like, and don't get me wrong, even I'm not at a place, like I see some of these guys like a Carlin to me, like Carlin was always saying something. He always had something to say.
Oh, yeah.
And for me, sometimes it's like, I've got something I really want to say, but for me to get there, I've got a couple kind of bullshit things between it. And I would like for the bullshit to be less between saying something. But, it takes time. It takes decades to develop that.
Which, I mean, if you go back and look at Carlin's work, the breadth of his work is massive. It was like a 30-year career, multiple specials, completely different styles of comedy. He was clean at one point, and then he went into just what I think was the apex of him was the 7 bad words you can't say on TV.
Yeah.
And that kind of like was a springboard of just him continuing to be funny for a long time.
Well, he had some time after that where I think he got turned into like an ism where it's like people were able to do like George Carlin isms.
Yeah.
And I think that's whenever he pulled back a little bit and kind of went away for a little bit. And that's whenever he came back and he was very angry. And he kind of changed his tone. He kind of changed his cadence a little bit. And that's, to me, I mean, the things towards the end of his death were the things that I enjoyed the most, where he came out and he was just angry at everything. And he'd kind of detached himself from whatever it was that was ailing him before.
I know, yeah, I remember like towards the end where he had the full white beard and you were looking at George Carlin, but you were also looking at an old man on stage.
Yeah.
And it made it funnier, to be honest.
But he
with
didn't
you,
seem like an old man. He seemed like an old man that wasn't like he wasn't. He didn't seem like an old man that was doing something he shouldn't have been doing. He looked like he belonged there more than anybody else.
Yeah, I agree with that. No. I'm not saying it in a bad way. It was almost like you could think of the dude on the porch that always has that angry face.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh shit. There's so much more behind that angry face. There's so much validity to what you're saying and why you are that way. And I think
it's like an old man with a shotgun on the porch, but like you actually end up sitting down next to him and he just tells you some great stories. You're like, how did we both end up in this situation?
And it's like, you've had a hell
Is that
of a
thing
life,
loaded?
sir.
He's like, this thing's definitely loaded.
He's like, it's always loaded. It's one of those
exactly.
things. But no, to that effect, I mean, if you look at somebody like a George Carlin, he is such a rarity in any form of entertainment to be relevant for so long and recreating yourself for so many different ways. It's difficult to even fathom how someone would have a career like that.
It's weird with comedians. I think in this city, even like I think about it, I've with the special out now, and I hope everybody goes and watches it. It's called Trina. It's weird now to. My life has been so chaotic at times, and just thinking about it, the drive. I was thinking about it this morning, even. Just like, a couple of years ago, I was so bad on drugs, or 3 years ago, I was so bad on drugs, and everything was so bad. And now last night I'm putting my kid to bed. The special's out. I had this huge opportunity a few weeks ago to be on the Dumb Zone, which is part of the ticket here in Dallas.
Nice, very nice. Congratulations.
Thank you. Like I grew up listening to that guy, and Mark's retweeted the special and Ralph retweeted the special and and putting my kid down to bed last night and I'm with his mom and I was with Harlan Williams a couple weeks ago and I've had all these
Surreal, right?
It's very surreal, and I feel like I'm constantly falling down this hill where I don't. It's like only as your head comes back up and it heads back down again do you get to go like, oh, that was cool, and then like you're heading for the ground again, But at least you have something to look at, Like as every once in a while as the Earth rotates, you're like, oh, that was a cool thing that happened, and then you're just heading back towards the ground again as life happens. Life is what it is.
Which is so funny. If you had the opportunity to talk to Lawrence from a few years ago, he maybe wouldn't even imagine what today looked like.
Yeah, and I would tell him to like slow down and enjoy this a little bit because we didn't think we were going to get here.
Right.
To get to a place where and I'm trying to wrap my head around it, and I think I get nervous. I think I get nervous about like if everything's okay, what am I going to do?
Oh yeah, it's kind of like you've been in survival mode for so long that when finally you no longer have to be there, you're kind of like, is this real or is this just another like road bump and I'm going to be back in that shitty situation again?
Yeah, like anytime something good happens, I'm just waiting for the other foot to drop. Anger and depression are such comforting friends.
Misery loves company. Yeah. It's one of those things. It's so hard, right, to get rid of those thoughts in your head.
When you're angry and upset, you can sit at the bar alone because you're not alone. You're sitting with anger and you're sitting with, how upset you are, depressed about something. If you're in a good mood and you're feeling great, like you're just at a bar alone. Yeah. And you're like, oh, this kind of sucks. You know what I mean? Like, why am I at this bar alone? Like, that's weird. But if you're angry, you're sitting there with your best friend.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we'll both have another round.
Yeah.
Plus, I got these other 4 in my head. You know what I mean? Now it's actually a party.
And that's what I was going to say is like when we were a little while ago talking about like the multiple versions of ourselves in our heads, it's always when you're at like this really dark place that they all want to just come together and be like, hey, remember when things were shittier?
Yeah.
And this happened and that happened? Guess what? It's going to happen again. And it's so hard because in that same bar, there's like a 12-year-old version of you just trying to yell at the top of their lungs going like, bullshit, it's going to be bad forever. It doesn't have to be bad forever, but like nobody wants to listen to the kid in the room, right?
Yeah.
And at some point, you got to start listening to the kid in the room.
Yeah. I had that thought. I found some old pictures the other day, and it was like me as a very young boy, very young kid. And it was just very representative of like the special in a lot of ways because it like showed people I grew up around. Like there was one dude, I would play in this blues band with these, like, my mom had a boyfriend. I would play in a blues band with her friends. And one of the guys, he had like a fake arm, but this is before fake arms were cool, like prosthetics that look like a hand. Like he just had a beer opener. Basically, it's just like the hook,
the hooky kind of thing.
Yeah. And you're just like seeing all these guys smashing beers, and I'm like 7, maybe 8, and I'm playing the drums, and there's like a picture of a naked woman on a motorcycle behind me, and then I'm playing guitar, and all these crazy characters that were around me when I was a kid, and then like thinking about, getting to the place where I have a special and people want to sit down and talk to me about it is like, it's like kind of cool.
I don't know if you have this feeling, and I have another question I want to ask you, but for me, it's like, now that I'm old enough to understand it, I'm like, I like this version way more than the bland reality that is most people's lives of go to work, come home, dinner, watch Monday Night Football or whatever you're into, have a couple of beers, go to bed, repeat.
Yeah.
I like contained chaos more than I like just smooth roads. It's weird.
And clearly I do too, because I've insisted on the chaos enough times in my life that, I would clearly the smooth paved road, but I think I've lived this way for so long that like, I was joking with the comic the other day, like my new kink is stability. Like anytime a girl's like, I'm a bad bitch, I'm like, my insurance does not cover that. I do not, we can't afford that over here.
I like that. That's an interesting take on things.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
Like, I like the chaos of like, in my own personal life, like in my head, because that's going to be there anyways. And like, and it comes out, I'm doing comedy shows all the time, I'm playing music all the time. So it can bleed out there, but like, with having the kid in my life and everything now.
I was going to say, I think kids really have that grounding effect.
Yeah,
where
for sure.
You can have the chaos and it can have a symbiosis with what is this genuinely beautiful part of your life, which is your family.
And I can feel myself being scared because like whatever, if I'm talking, like I catch myself, if I'm going to talk about my kid, like that's kind of what I have in my head at the moment, as far as like any given night lately. And I'm going up on stage, I'm like, oh, I got a lot of this kid material. I catch myself looking at the audience and thinking like, how are they going to, do we have enough older people in here, like adult age people in here that they're going to vibe with this, or do I need to change it up a little bit? Which almost was taking me back to square one whenever you're new. It's like you kind of got to shake that off and just do you. But just like, I know not everybody in the room is a dad, and I know not everybody's going to know exactly what I'm talking about, and you get nervous about it. Like,
But I mean, all of us have been kids.
for sure. For sure. And I think the way I look at it is hopefully it's interesting enough. Like I'm mixing in my vape. I talk about how my kid knew what the financial situation was. He wouldn't be throwing food on the ground. He'd be helping me find the vape I lost on the couch so he
Right.
could take a hit.
Right.
Like because he's stressed out. And so like I'm trying to find like, I think that's probably more like, there's, even if they're like 21 or something, like they know if they vape, they know how it is to like lose it in the chair or in the couch, and they're looking for
It'll
it.
drive you nuts, especially if it's like the middle of the night and there's no store open that you can go and pick up another one.
Yeah,
So
you're
you're
like, where the fuck is my vape?
I need that nicotine hit so bad. I need to go find it somehow. And you're like just terrorizing the whole house trying to find something.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, it's in my other pants.
But it's exciting. Like I'm excited to see what the kid's going to bring out of me as far as being like an artist. Like what he's going to inspire in me.
So he's 3.
I was thinking the other day, because you have kids.
I got
is it
3
girl
boys.
or 3 boys? Okay, so this is perfect. I was thinking the other day,
And I have a 3-year-old, so my youngest is 3.
I can tell that my fear for what he's going to experience is what is pulling a lot of my mind energy into. It's like I look at him and I think about what he's going to worry about later. If that makes sense. And it was just one of those things, like it was one of those ideas that I haven't really gotten to try on stage yet, maybe once. And it's just this idea of like, it's weird. Like everybody loves little girls, and then little girls turn into princesses, and then they turn into women that, as we should, are protected. Oftentimes, not always, of course. But there's an expectation. There's an expectation that women should be treated well and taken care of. But as a little boy, it's like I can't tell my son. It's like, hey man, everybody loves you right now. Clearly, everybody loves you. But then, just like this, one day you're gonna wake up and you're just traffic. You're just traffic. You're just the reason why somebody else can't get somewhere on time. And it's this idea of like, because you even see it in the way we phrase things, where it's like, I was thinking about like the Titanic. It's like, or the boats. It's like whenever they say women and children first.
Right.
Well, at some point, you're not a woman.
And you're not a child.
And you're not a child. It's like at some point, everybody loves you. And just like this, you go down with a fucking boat, dude. You better die. It's like, and it's as someone who is a very sensitive and caring person, it's like, how do you tell your son that like, hey, at one point you're not women and children anymore. Like you just traffic and you go down with a boat. And that is the experience, I think, of being a man, the experience of being like in our culture. But like, I like talking, I want to talk about it through the lens of how I see what my son's walking into. Cause I don't have any of that in me of like, it's just like, well, women get this, so shouldn't men be treated like this? Like that's not the angle.
No, they shouldn't be. Like as a man, we genuinely understand that because we are given the abilities that women are not given, just biologically speaking, our sheer power, like actual physical strength, comes with certain
Well, I've been talking about this on stage. I'd say about how I make my son pull the chair out for his mom when we go out to eat, and I make him hold it. He's 3. He holds the door open for his mom when we go out to eat. Like I'm trying to instill these values in him. But I talk to audiences and I go, but there's certain things that good men do that women don't notice, that we don't get credit for. And I'll point out a woman like, ma'am, like if you and I leave this club tonight at the exact same time and we happen to have parked next to each other, at some point when we're walking back to our cars, I have to stop because I'm following you.
Yeah.
I go like, we just parked next to each other. And I also hate that happened. But as a gentleman, at some point you just stop and you let that woman get the distance and go about. And I don't care if it's cold outside or if it's hot. You just go, okay, I'm just gonna have to stand here for a minute, let her give enough space so she feels comfortable, And it's like
I had that exact same thing happen to me yesterday. I needed to drop off some paperwork, and it was like the evening around 7, 8 o'clock. And it was just a residential neighborhood in Dallas. I parked just like one house past the house that I needed to be at. So I was like walking back towards that house, and there was just older lady on a walk or a jog. And I don't know what it was, but it was like a subconscious trigger that said, you're walking too close to this woman. Yeah. And I stopped in my tracks and pretended like I was looking at paperwork just so she wouldn't feel uncomfortable. in the slightest bit. And I know it's like, obviously I'm not there to attack anybody. I just need to drop off some paperwork.
Yeah.
But I don't know what it was that my brain goes like, stop. That you don't want to make anybody feel uncomfortable.
Because you're good. Exact. That's the whole point. It's like, hey, I just don't, I'm okay being inconvenienced for a second so that you can feel comfortable, even though hopefully you don't feel uncomfortable. I hope I don't give off the energy that makes you uncomfortable. But also I think sometimes as a man, you're like, you don't want to get caught feeling like you're somebody who is making somebody uncomfortable. So you're like, I'll just give you space because I don't want to get looked at like I'm somebody that would kidnap you or assault you.
I try to teach my kids that, look, you're boys, you will turn into men one day.
Yeah.
And there comes a ton of responsibility that comes with being a man.
Yeah.
One of which is you're going to look out for women.
Yeah.
You have to have this mindset. No, we are not equal. No, we shouldn't be equal. Women should be treated better than men. And I truly believe that, yes, as men in a society, we have an obligation to treat all women better than we treat other men. And that may sound like a dick thing to say, but there's a reason for it.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, without them, there is no continuation of man.
Yeah.
And we need to understand that, and we need to hold it in a very high regard. Doesn't mean that we need to be pussies in any way, shape, or form, or be soft, but understand that chivalry is a good thing to have. Being a gentleman is a great thing to be. Like you are teaching your son, hold the door, say yes, ma'am, no, sir, pulling out a chair. I try to teach my kids all of the same things, and it's very important. Like when people come over to my house, my boys know that they need to come and say hello.
Yeah.
It's very, very important that you greet a guest in your home. Come by, say hello, say how are you, and then immediately go to your room.
Yeah.
Because it's not your time to hang out in the living room and be a distraction or be the center of attention. You are to go and just hang out with your brothers in your room and play. And at some point, I'm sure you'll come to the living room and fuck around a little bit and ha will happen. That's cool.
Yeah.
But you're not supposed to, you're supposed to be out of sight, out of mind. Because, hey, man, I'm sorry, but when you grow up, that's probably what life, your existence will be a lot of times. Like my wife will have her friends come over and they'll just have like a ladies' night at home at our house, right? I usually take my boys and leave.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, we're out, dude. We don't need to be here for the next 2 or 3 hours. Leave them alone.
It's weird what values get put into you and the ways that they're put into you and how they filter through you and how they re-enter the world.
Yeah. And sometimes, the wrong values are instilled in us.
Yeah. Or people just get the wrong perception of things.
Yes,
there's people that read Catcher in the Rye and didn't really feel anything. And then there's some people that were like, well, this is my manifesto. This is, this is how I see the world.
And I wouldn't want anybody to take one singular text or one singular event and turn that into their ideology for life.
Yeah.
We see that all the time now. Of course, and it's so stupid.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a multifaceted human being.
Same.
So are you. So is everybody else. But if I just say that one thing is everything about you, that's so stupid, dude.
It is.
That makes no sense whatsoever.
Well, hey, I got to get to this show.
So answer one last question for me. And it was, you said the name of your special, Trina.
Trina, yeah.
Please explain it to our audience why you named it Trina. We can end on that.
I named it after my mother because I think one of the first bits I ever did that was very important to me, which is not in the special, but I talk about her a lot. I think my mom was, my mom had a lot of the same issues that I had, struggled with addiction. She's also on the other side of it now and doing great. And I did make a big mistake where, I named the special after her and I kind of forgot to tell her I did that. And we had like a real bad conversation at Red Lobster recently.
Really?
Yeah, like she was pretty not happy with it, and I understand because I think when she watched it, I think she felt a lot of the things I feel all the time, which is like whenever you get categorized as something that does not define you fully as a person.
Okay.
Sometimes I don't. It's not that I don't mind being called a drug addict, and I don't mind being called recovered or in recovery, but I get tired of it being the whole thing. I'd rather have it be in my back pocket or in my little pocket rather than it be this.
Yeah, it shouldn't be the theme of your life. It's just a chapter.
Like I'm just walking around wearing like a T-shirt that says like drug addict, and like that gets kind of even if it's at the bottom says recovered, you're kind of like, I would like to take this shirt off.
Yeah, I've always hated the fact that people that are no longer alcoholics need to be labeled as an alcoholic forever.
Yeah.
Stop, dude. Like shit happened. That was like 10 years ago, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Cool. You've moved on, obviously.
Well, I think also we push people into stories. Like the more we tell somebody that they are something, like the more you tell, like if you take a kid and you treat him like he's going to be a criminal when he grows up, it becomes much more likely he's going to be a criminal when he grows up.
Yeah,
and we
like,
do it to adults too.
Subliminal messaging usually ends up turning you into like something later on.
Opportunity comes up to like somebody's like, hey, you want to rob this place with me or you want to shoplift with me? It's much more likely because everybody's treated them like that's something that they would do. It just makes it the gap is this much bigger of the door for them to go like, I mean, I guess I should. It seems like everybody thinks I'm going to. I guess I'll do it.
Yeah. I mean, I know, when we first had our conversation, you talked about your mom, and I knew her name was Trina.
Uh-huh.
So for me, when I heard that your special was called Trina, I thought it just came from an absolute place of love.
And it did come from an absolute place of love. And I felt bad because I wish I would have spent more time explaining the fact that we both kind of are the same person, because that's why a lot of that stuff is in there.
Right. Yeah.
But, did an hour 13 and just didn't really get to that part as best as well as I wish I would have. And just like her, and I went and did that big interview recently, and the meth and all that stuff is what they really wanted to talk about. And it's not for me to put it on her, but I've decided for myself too. It's like I really want to. It's not up to other people to if I go do an interview, it's not up to other people to not talk about those things. It's up to me to grow into a place where that's not what they want to talk about.
Right.
So
that makes sense to me. And I guess like for me, this conversation really was, I didn't have any notes in my mind. I never do. I just like to sit down and see where the flow goes.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate this conversation. And I could understand how some people would want to have like a narrative of what they want to ask and the answers that they really want to hear, because they're just trying to get like that clickbaity kind of information from you. This has never been the point of this and never will be. So I thank you for your honest conversation. I really appreciate you coming in today. Tell people where they can find you, your special, and what's next.
Everything's on at Lawrence Rosales on all the social medias. I got in early. The special's on YouTube. It's on the I'm a Fan of network.
Shout out to I'm a Fan of.
And just follow me on social media.